Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Akhtas Aslam from Teach Educational HRD. I have with me today Dr. Mehwish Raza, who is the Dean for the School of Education at FC College University in Lahore. And I have Ms. Saima Askar Riaz with me, who I know as an academic consultant, as well as a person who is an expert in higher education and admissions. I'm not going to do long intros. You can read them on our Facebook page, but I would really like to talk a little bit about the background of our conversation today. So we have been doing some teach talks about other topics, for example, the single national curriculum, and this is the first time we are going live talking about assessments. Over the last few weeks, well, really over the last few months, we have seen that there has been some confusion and some concerns about how Cambridge assessments and international examinations will be conducting its exams, whether or not, and then how the results will be processed. And of course, the schools which have been using CAIE's services previously have had to deal with a new situation because of the pandemic, so on and so forth. So this has, for us at Teach, raised some questions regarding the impact for the students and also in terms of whether or not they pose as whether or not we can really call these assessments anymore. And if we can call them assessments, what are the different aspects of assessments and evaluation that have been questioned and that are important for us to understand as we try to make sense of what has really happened. Okay, so I would, Mehwish has been kind enough to share a presentation with us today. So I'm going to be using that presentation as we go along. And I'm just going to take a second to put that live. Okay, just a second. Okay. Okay, here we go. Mehwish, if you can give us a background of really what has happened with these CAIE results and how is it that they are going to affect us as we go along?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk about the recent developments and a way forward regarding the Cambridge results. As we all know that on March 23rd, the Cambridge Assessment International Examination, CAIE, they cancelled all high-stakes examination in the wake of the pandemic that is caused by the coronavirus. We all know about that. So starting from April, there was a lot of guidance that they provided to the schools to prepare students' predicted grades. If you could move on with the presentation, I have a complete layout of the four-step procedure that they followed. So grade prediction, the journey of grades from schools to students' transcripts or the recently announced grades. Let's take, first of all, I think to understand this entire situation, it's very important for everyone to understand that what was the procedure, the steps that CAIE followed or adopted to announce the scores. So it was a four-step procedure, starting off with teachers collecting data, evidence to predict grades for each student for each subject. The next step was to determine the rank orders within each grade. A rank order is sort of a list that tells that which student comes where in order of attainment. from highest to lowest attaining. So teachers were required to give ranks to each student based on the evidence that they had collected. Another very important point that we all must remember while understanding this procedure, that teachers could not place multiple students in one rank, creating sort of a tie, which means that even if they had the evidence that showed that two students or more students performed in very much similar manner, they had to use their professional judgment to separate students and place them in order they believed to be most appropriate. So after collating these grades, the school sent these to the centers. And the head of the centers confirmed that these predicted grades comply with the past performance of the school. Now, centers had to submit the predicted scores to CAIE by 29th of May. The predicted grades had to pass through a statistical standardization. Now, this is where this entire fiasco has this is where it sprouted off from. So Cambridge International, although they clearly stated on their webpage that the standardization exercise will not change the rank orders of the candidates provided by the center. However, it didn't happen this way, and the predicted grades were heavily downgraded. Now, first of all, it's important for us to understand the process of downgrading. What do we mean when we say that the grades were downgraded? So Cambridge International, they combined the grade ranks for each grade, each subject. Then they converted these grades into frequency scores, into decimal figures. And based on the number of candidates expected to achieve a particular grade in June 2020, they compared the results achieved by the students at each center in a particular subject. And this they did for the previous 3 years, keeping in mind the previous 3 years' performance. Finally, they generated an expected number of candidates who are likely to qualify for a particular grade and converted the decimal place into a whole number, So, but when this grade is reversed and it is taken to the previous whole number, that's what is called as downgrading. No, please go. Yeah, here, stay here. So when they generated the decimal figures and they rounded it off. So instead of rounding it off to the next number, they rounded it off to the previous number. And this is in the reverse order, it's called the downgrading. So according to the available statistics, 35.6% students just in the UK were downgraded to one grade, and 3.3% students only in the UK again were downgraded to two grades. Unfortunately, such kind of sophisticated data is not available in Pakistan, but the backlash was severe. We have been reading about it in the newspapers, that the television has been broadcasting. Students have been so upset. The social media was taken by a storm by this when the grades were announced. Anyways, moving on to understand the process. Once the predicted grades frequency was determined, this complex formula that you just showed on the screen, yes, this very complex formula. By the way, it's not as complex as it looks like, but this formula was used to then determine the grades for the year 2020. Now, let me take the viewers from what do these figures mean, or what do these initials mean. C stands for the cumulative grade. C19, C18, C17 are the cumulative grades respectively for 2019, 2018, and 2017. G is the entire global cohort, the ones who achieved a particular grade. And N is the number of students, number of candidates, or number of results announced. You can say it like that. So this is the statistical standardization that they came up with. But and the world says that this algorithm is unfair. We are going to talk about it, that why was it unfair and what are the factors that are likely to be held responsible for whatever happened. So anyways, basically they use a norm referenced measurement method. I'm going to talk about the norm reference scoring method in a minute. After the cumulative grade was calculated, this formula was basically used to determine the scores for the current year, for 2020. And this, if you could go further. Yeah. So norm reference results. This brings us to a point where now we should talk about the norm referenced measurement. There are two types of measurements. One is the criterion referenced, where individual student performs and is being assessed. And if three of us, let's say, are class fellows, and we are taking the same, studying the same syllabus and taking the same examination for the same course, then your performance or the grade that you have achieved has nothing to do or would have no impact over mine. In case of the criterion referenced measurement, however, in the norm referenced, no, previous. Yeah, in the norm referenced measurement, our scores determines that, how your score would have an impact on mine. So why? Because it's in comparison with all the candidates. It is the theoretical average, I would say, that is determined by comparing the scores. And this is one reason why schools and students, the different candidates from around the world, they did not consider it wise enough to apply for a reconsideration of their scores when initially CAIE announced it. It is only after this countrywide backlash that they considered looking into their formulas and considering and accepting that there was something unfair about it.
Okay, Mevish, if I may interrupt you here.
Yes, please.
So one question that is really coming to my mind right now is कि ये norm reference measurement really how does it really impact the students and where all is it really prevalent? And similarly for criterion referenced measurement. Now I recognize कि criterion reference measurement को हम आम ज़बान में absolute grading कहते हैं या absolute marking कहते हैं. बच्चों को अपने टोटल के नंबर में से पता चल जाता है कि उनके 70 आए हैं, 80 आए हैं out of 100, whatever. But again, these things are contextualized. There are particular systems which use norm referencing, and there are particular systems which use criterion reference measurements. Why and where are they prevalent?
This, I would say that norm referenced measurement is similar to taking out or extracting the percentile, where everybody's, the bigger curve, and then every candidate, every student, the place is determined around the curve, keeping in mind everyone else's score. So this is, everyone is connected, interconnected. Everybody's performance and progress is interconnected in norm referenced. Students do not, or candidates do not stand alone in norm referenced measurement. You're right that there are some systems where it's prevalent. For example, when we appear for tests like, where job interviews and tests that require candidates to internal comparison to be drawn upon. So it's prevalent in that context where the excellent or the most powerful candidate has to be extracted out of the cohort.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think criterion reference is really what all the schools do. At least in Pakistan, हमारी सारी grading system percentage पे determine होती है, not really by percentiles. And this becomes a really interesting point because all the predictions that the schools are doing are based on criterion reference measurements, on percentages, या on absolute judgment के अच्छा इस बच्चे को 70% marks इसमें मिलने थे, या 50 out of 70 मिलने थे, and that is compared to percentages.
Yeah,
Whereas with norm reference, there is a different system involved, which is not something that schools, at least in Pakistan, use as a regular practice. Although I know that some higher education institutes in Pakistan do use norm referencing, और बहुत सारे students को फिक्र होती है कि relative grading में उनका outcome जो है वो बहुत low होगा if there are a significant percentage of high achievers, of relatively high achievers in the class. So this becomes a bigger concern for assessments, and I think this is also something very interesting for teachers and parents to understand, because and I think Saima can also support me here perhaps, because these are things that people don't know about, and these are where the question marks really emerge. What do you think, Saima?
exactly.
Yes, I agree, Akhtas. I think because, as you said, there are some universities in the private sector in Pakistan that do use relative grading and they do mark students on a curve. Lekin kyunki school assessments mein, this is not something that has typically been used. So I think that's why there was obviously so much confusion, so much backlash as well. It was just, I think it's at the school level when you're dealing with such large cohorts, it probably also it does impact students much more unfairly, especially in this situation where it was sprung upon them at the last minute, than it does in an institution where the students go into a section or into a class knowing that they're going to be challenged and they're going to be assessed against their peers. So in that case, the relative grading, in my understanding, is used more to actually also motivate students to do better, but also for them to prepare them for real life, where they do know that only the best, only everybody will not necessarily get the same opportunities, and to also prepare them not only for success but also for failure in some ways, because there will be times in their life where they will have to face failure. But I think to do that with such young students, especially in the context of a global assessment system, is what has been more problematic. And Mavish can correct me if I'm wrong there.
I think
You're absolutely right.
Mavish would also agree with the fact that assessment criteria really need to be communicated beforehand.
Yeah, beforehand.
And in this particular scenario, हम उसको पैंडेमिक की वजह से कहें, हम इस वजह से कहें कि CAIE को समझ नहीं आया कि ऐसी चीजें हैंडल करनी है. Irrespectively, the fact is that the students were not communicated the information beforehand, and everybody was really processing everything as it happened and as it came along. Even the schools were really confused in the beginning, and the communication that they were getting from the from CAIE was on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, where they were getting updated information continuously. So really that changes a lot of concerns about how we understand, a lot of things about how we understand ideal systems of assessment and grading.
Yeah. But Akhtas, here, I'd like to add something. You see, we're very right in saying that the criteria needs to be shared with the students before the sit for an exam. But in this situation, an examination didn't happen. You see,
Yes.
the examination didn't happen, but the teachers knew that the evidence that they would collate and the grade that they would predict, the rank that they are going to, the way they are going to rank the students in their particular classes would have an impact on the final grade. All stakeholders, at least the country centers, the teachers, the school heads, I think with exception to the students, because they had nothing to do with collation of evidence and then subsequent grade prediction. So all other stakeholders knew that previous 3 years performance would be considered while announcing the final grades. So I wouldn't say that it was unfair that way. But yes, the formula, the algorithm in itself, this is not fair. And another aspect which I'm going to talk about, the core reason for all of this this drama to happen, and the core reason what was not well thought out in this entire process. I'm going to talk about it in a minute. If we can go further on in the presentation. Yeah, so the process of standardization started off with it was based on historical model of performance, where each school's previous 3 years performance was considered. And yeah,
Okay.
yeah, thank you. There have been influencing factors. It's hard. Basically, these what are these influencing factors? There are many, but the top three factors that had affected the grade have been the school performance, grade ranks, and class size. We are forgetting that class size matters a lot. If in a particular grade a teacher has graded, let's say, 10 students as attaining A stars, but in the last 3 years the school has only shown A stars for, let's say, 5% of the total class. So it really depends on what was the class size in the previous year and what is the class size in this year. And such minute details were not considered while calculating the final score and announcing the final score. Now, these are very minute details, and they require a deep study of the context, going into the grassroots level, studying each school, its context, the previous cohorts, frequency of grades, and all of that. Then also, our teachers' bias is also something that would have played here during, especially while they had ranked within each grade. Now, it's very difficult to rank the students within, let's say, A grade. In our systems, teachers are really not trained to have this continuum of performance for students कि अगर A grade में ही high achievement और low achievement क्या होगी within each grade. For us, an A grader is an A grader. What do you think, Saima? Isn't it like that?
Absolutely, I agree, and I think a lot of especially within the higher grades, it would have been very subjective. Then the grading would have been, a teacher would have sat and said, okay, these two students have exactly the same marks, but this one is more active. इसकी motivation level थोड़ी ज़्यादा है. इसका ये ज़्यादा frequently मेरे पास आता रहा है या आती रही है. This person has shown more concern about their marks, so so maybe this student is probably more pushed about their grade. So and this is just an example, but obviously a teacher then has to find some way to sift out the higher A grader from the slightly weaker A grader, and that's the only thing that they can look at. So, for example, in the context of admissions, in previous years, when we get students who are all other things being the same, if they have exactly the same A level grades, if they have or predicted grades exactly the same O level grades, what do we look at as university admissions people? We look at the personal statement. So we look at how motivated or how well-rounded does the student seem to us, and that's what we use to then identify if we have only one space and we have 3 applicants with exactly the same profile, who does that place goes to. So I think in this case, when teachers have to have used some kind of subjective criteria, then they obviously didn't have an essay or a statement from the student to sell their case. Then they would have used their own professional judgment, their own subjective judgment about a student. Or uske andar, yes, some teachers would have used it, hopefully most teachers would have used it very ethically, but some teachers may have let their personal biases for or against a student also cloud their judgment, and that's where the problem also lies.
I think there are so many integrated factors here. It takes us back to the teacher preparedness. It takes us back to the preparedness of the schools to determine such kind of ranks within each grade. Our schools, do we have this continuum and a description that tells us that what is the highest attainment within each grade level? So these are the things, these are missing bits from our system. I cannot comment, and I do not know exactly what happens and what has happened around the world. But I can, because we know our own school systems here, especially the ones, the lower tier schools. You see, so these are the question marks. And schools have also used this particular time to misstate the grades, and these grades have not matched with their past 3 years performance, because of which, it has taken a toll on the entire grade bank. So we cannot really ignore all of these factors. These are very real, very pragmatic reasons for all of this to happen.
Can I just add here as well, Avish? I think, as you said, that some schools did overstate, and I'm not saying specifically for Pakistan, because obviously the decision to revert back to the center assessed grades has not been taken only for Pakistan or only because of Pakistan. This has been taken worldwide, and we have to understand that there are, as you said, the lower tier schools, our HSNs and Karachi grammar schools and LGSs probably would not have had such a problem, but it's really the lower tier schools. It's actually schools across the world, in various parts of the world, where the teachers are not so prepared. Also, where I don't think Cambridge had actually set out any standardized set of criteria for or different bands through which teachers could actually slot in students in different categories. So, for example, the IB board does give, they train their teachers throughout the teaching classroom and for the internal assessments. And a lot of IB trained teachers are actually external examiners for the IB board. So, and they mark their students internally on a set of standardized rubrics that they have to copy paste and put the students into, similar to how when we mark for any standardized, say, IELTS exam, we have standardized sets where the student has to meet some positive criteria to be given that grade. And in this case, I think Cambridge did not really publish any kind of standardized guidance for the teachers, so that to slot in the students into a particular high A or a low A. And that is why teachers were they were just practically shooting in the dark, especially for schools. I mean, the schools with smaller cohorts were impacted, of course, for certain reasons, and then the schools with the larger cohorts were impacted because probably teachers didn't know the students so well as well. So so हमने वो भी देखना है. And of course, I mean, UK के context में तो it also became a very political issue, because we have to remember that in the UK it is the CAIE is the exam given in the public, used in the public sector. And so therefore, there it became a concern about diversity. It became an issue of inclusiveness, whereas here we didn't have that issue, because in Pakistan it is obviously only the private sector that that appears for the CAIE. So वो हमारे वो वाले issues कम थे, but UK में तो फिर एक और debate शुरू हो गई थी. So, and I think we were trying to follow what the UK was doing, which also added, so it was sort of comparing apples to oranges in a way.
Well, taking on what you have said, कि उनको एक bank description देनी चाहिए थी. But having said that, Saima, we also have to be cognizant of the fact that it was such an unprecedented situation. Nobody had ever thought that this would happen. Such a high-stake examination that has a long history of operations would call the examination off. This is highly unprecedented. And having said that, at such short time notice, creating such bank description would have taken more time than what they had allocated. But having said that, all of these hidden factors, they've had an impact on students' grades. And then what happened later? All of this, what happened? What did it lead to? It led to a revision in their statement. It led to a revision in the final decision, which has had, in my personal opinion, that has had even more worst impact on times to come, and
Yes.
on even, on present situations. So,
I absolutely agree. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I think Abhi, and I've been saying this to everybody, we may be celebrating right now
yes,
because all our children have got excellent grades, but where does that lead them for the future? What do all these A grades actually mean when nobody has a C? So, at the end of the day, what have we done? I absolutely agree with you, Mavish. If they had said, okay, yes, this is a problem, this is what's happened, we will not revise all the grades, we will just revise our appeals process. Because this year they had said that there would be no individual appeals, and schools would have to appeal for the whole cohort, and they would have to
yeah,
appeal, and they would have to say that there was a problem with the standardization process, or there was a
yes,
problem with the
exactly.
scores they admitted, and obviously no school wanted to do that. We had already seen that schools had told the parents to just accept what they'd gotten. So if they'd actually just changed the appeals process and said, we will allow individual appeals if they are backed up by evidence from contextual evidence from the school, and taken it forward from there rather than changing these grades en masse, because
No,
that has now flipped everything over for everybody.
no. Saima, I personally feel that if it had been a reasonable approach to look at this, they could have taken more time, and they could
Yeah.
have come up with a more sophisticated formula, a more sophisticated and a more elaborated procedure to recalculate the scores. But what they have done, that is basically a huge compromise on high standards. This is
Yeah.
what it looks like. And
Right.
I'd say that this is exactly what it is for the parents, for students, for the community that has long associated high standards with CIE. It's a big question mark now.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
well, for the in the international context, I really don't see this entire revision of scores having an impact on the university admissions, especially now when the UK has lifted the cap from their university admissions. So in the bigger picture, it won't have an impact, but in the personal capacities, I mean, when we talk about our own self achievement, and especially for the schools who probably have been working so hard on improving the academics, so there's no way that now we can see the personal pride and the personal development that at individual level the schools must have attained or could have
Mhm.
attained. There is a possibility. After all, there are evaluation mechanisms, especially with these large, widespread school networks, for example, City School and Beacon House school systems. The evaluation units are so actively working, and the schools are also, there's always a school improvement program that is going on at the school level. So now, for the high schools, it's difficult to say that how authentic these results have been, and if this result is a good reflection of good practices at the school level or not.
Yeah, I think I agree. And going back to what you said about the UK lifting the cap, I just sort of point out that cap was always for home students. It was not something that affected us international students anyway. So the number cap is in UK universities is always put up by the government for home students because the UK government is going to be financing those students.
Yeah.
For international students, universities decide their own cap for each course.
Mhm.
So I think that is sort of irrelevant to international students. But what has happened in terms of universities is that obviously, they cannot increase the number of international seats overnight. Uh, the result was declared on the 13th. By the 15th or the 16th, UK universities had made most of their decisions. They had rejected who they had to reject. And they had said that if you appeal and your result is improved in an appeals process, then we will revoke that rejection. Now they have changed that to say, of course, if your center says grade has improved your final result, we will try to give you a place on your original course. But at the end of the day, how many more spaces can they increase, given that they still have to do social distancing? So they have to, there's timetabling constraints, there's faculty constraints. They can't hire more people overnight. If they have to maintain their standards, they can't just, increase the number of students on the programs. So there's that as well. But my concern is, although I work with UK universities, in the context of Pakistan, my concern is still more with Pakistani universities, because at the end of the day, from the hundreds of thousands of students who have appeared for the CAIE exam, a very small minority will be going off to the UK or to the US. The majority of them will be studying in Pakistan. So my concern is also more with, why are we not looking at those systems? Why are we not looking at those students who are in debate and everywhere where I'm listening to, whether I'm listening to ministers or whoever I'm listening to, they're talking about what will happen to the students who have to go abroad. It doesn't matter. Those students will find opportunities. They are still the privileged few. What will happen to the students who have to find spaces in local universities? Do local universities have that adaptability to now accommodate all these A graders? That's what I think is very important.
Yes, and Saima, if I may just pitch in here, I think one of the biggest concerns with regards to the Cambridge assessments and any international assessments is the equivalence that is given by IBCC for all local admissions. And we know that earlier when the pandemic started building up, IBCC had provided a revised criteria for OLA level results. Although now that I think about it, I don't see which of the criteria will really work, because now the situation has just changed so much. And I don't think IBCC has really updated anybody about whether or not they will be revoking, changing, updating the equivalence criteria. And it's a little, it leaves the students in a lot of doubt and confusion, because बहुत सारे students ऐसे हैं even in the cohort that I am working with, who are going to be applying to public universities, who will for whom a great chunk of the admission criteria will be what comes out of that equivalence. And they don't know, while they're applying for the equivalence, we are not sure as to whether that 5% or that 10% criteria will be followed जो इन्होंने initially share किए थे IBCC ने, या वो पुराने वाला चलेगा, या अब वो absolute grading पे ही consider कर लेंगे, because अब तो predicted grade तो absolute grading की basis पे predict हुआ है.
So I think we need more clarity from the government on A, what IBCC is doing, and B, what instructions is the HEC giving to public universities about sort of adapting to all these students. Because private universities, at the end of the day, most of them do take their own entry test as well. So I think for private universities, it's probably going to be the simplest, because they will just change the weightage that they give to their own entry test as opposed to what they give to externally moderated grades. But I believe Aga Khan has already done that. They've already increased the weightage that they're giving to their own entry test. And they've announced that. So I think, again, from private universities, we need clarity, but even more than that, we need more clarity from the public sector universities. And there doesn't seem to be much conversation around that. No. And even our policymakers seem to be focusing on the elite few who will be going to the UK and the US.
Yes. And with regards to the...
Please carry on. Okay. I'm just saying that nobody...
Go ahead.
I'll just take a minute. I'm just saying that nobody has really thought about it yet. You said that HEC needs to give a statement. So far, we haven't received anything from the HEC. There has been no guidelines as to how should we internally adapt to this new situation, and with such high grades and students. But I agree with you that there has to be some kind of internal adjustments made to the criteria that each university uses to set the merit. And naturally, it goes without saying that the internal merit for universities, public sector universities, this year around is going to be sky high.
Yeah, we should absolutely. Yes. And also Mavish, for this will also have an impact on student recruitment and university admissions for the next 3-4 years, because remember, the students who got their O-level grades will now be made offers based on they will be given predicted grades now based on their O-level grades. Now students may actually, had they sat the exam, may have received B's and C's, but now that student has received A's. Now, when their school gives predicted grades based on those A's, and when a university looks at an application based on those A's, and that student actually, when they sit an A-level exam 2 years from now, will probably not achieve those A's because they did not work for these A's. How will that pan out? Will overall results, A-level results or predictions next year be, the same as they have been in the previous years? Will they match the results or will they not? So those are things that universities will have to look at, because at the end of the day, these school living exams are only as good as the universities they get you to. Nobody looks at your exam results after you have graduated from university. Nobody looks at your school results. Nobody's ever asked me afterwards what my marks in my inter were or what my marks in metric were. All they look at is our university grades.
Yes. True. And I think जो मुझे एक बात feel हो रही है बहुत ज़्यादा is कि जो quality of applicants है, that is also going to change, because we have seen that when universities, some private universities in Pakistan have opted for the SAT, which is a very research grounded test, even though there is a lot of conversation about how standardized tests are not inclusive. And so on and so forth, versus a test which is made in the university. So we see that there is a difference in the type of candidates which appear for the test, as well as the ones which qualify that test and successfully meet the admission criteria. Or generally, reading as well as quantitative skills, writing skills में थोड़ी variation होती है based on which test the student has given to come to the university. So what I am thinking, and I hope this does not really happen, but ये ना हो कि हमारे students के ऊपर एक label लग जाए कि ये 2020 वाला cohort था, इसी की वजह से जो है ना quality of the university cohort has really, or the university population has really changed. So I think we all need to preempt these things. We need to work with our students to ensure that they have the requisite skills that are required for not just university placements, but also successful career during the university. And because schools have been so much in touch with the students this summer, I think itna zyada kabhi bhi schools have never been this in touch with students over a summer break as they have been this year. That maybe counselors like myself or like Saima can be talking to students, telling them that this is what you should anticipate in the university, and these are things that you need to acquire before you start off with the first class, even though you have your results, even though you are meeting your conditions or your admission criteria. Okay. Saima, I believe we are losing you a little bit. Maywish, while we wait on for Saima to join in again, my concern is that so you said HSC has not really informed anything to the universities.
Not yet.
And not yet. And we know that you're also working with FC College University, and the admissions there have changed their policy. The admissions policies have been changed there. Can you highlight a little bit about the changes? Talk a little bit about the changes that have happened as part of the university that you are working with?
Well, initially FC used to conduct an admission test, and naturally that has not been carried out because of the pandemic. So we have been interviewing candidates, and these interviews have been very thorough, very comprehensive. There has been a candidate profile that has been created by the interviewees and by the interviewers, and there have been multiple faculty members in the interview. So these are few of the changes that FC has had made to adapt to the present situation. But we don't know how are we looking at the new admissions now from this fall, when this new group of students with really high grades are going to apply to us. So far, we haven't made any internalized decisions as well. And very much because naturally HEC as the governing body needs to give directives first, and then the universities would construct their internalized procedures and systems.
Okay. I think the point about HSC becomes really important, and I think Saima can also pitch in here because with the public universities, at least, we have not received any guidance as to what the university students can do in terms of their applications. And as far as I understand, some of the public universities, government-run universities, have not even announced their admission criteria yet. And we must also remember that while the grading has been a chaos or been really unexpected for those who have appeared for the OA level admissions, the IGCSEs. It has also been really uncertain for for the students who have taken the local qualifications or the local examinations, because their results have also been predicted on the basis of their previous results. But we don't see a lot of conversation about that in the social media, although of course their results and their admissions are also going to be impacted with it. अगर एक intermediate के student के part 1 के exams की basis पे उसके part 2 के exams आ गए हैं, और तो उसके लिए what is the situation going to be like? And I think one of the reasons we don't see a lot of conversation about this is because the government says that government has more ownership of those students, and they recognize कि इनको तो हमने जैसे तैसे, क्योंकि हम ही ने ये प्रोसेस बनाया है तो हमने इनको जैसे तैसे एक्सेप्ट तो करना ही है. So I'm going to assume and I'm going to hope that is part of the thought process. And I think Saima can also.
I think we also need some data. So we need to see, yes, I understand कि हमें Cambridge से तो जो data नहीं मिल रहा हमारे अपने students का, but that's a much more sophisticated data that is sort of within the results that have been received के पाकिस्तान से कितने A's थे, कितने B's थे historically, although वो होना चाहिए था, but at this point in time that's really immaterial. What we really need is our own data. So we know as Pakistanis, the British Council would have it, we know how many students appear for the exam. Do we really know how many of those go into public sector universities? How many of those go into private sector universities? Public sector universities maybe, I worked at Lahore College for Women for 4 years, and I know that we did not have any A-level or O-level applicants at all at Lahore College. Lahore ke andar, biggest women's university in Asia apparently, we did not have any applicants which were O-level, A-level students from any school across Pakistan. So, so public sector universities भी कौन सी वाली हैं जिनमें आ रहे हैं students?
I think Canadian में हैं, बिल्कुल जा रहे हैं. Some of my students have applied. Yeah. Yes.
So so they were going to CAIE, but they were not going to Lahore College. They may be going to government college, but they are an FC college, which is not public anymore.
I think a lot of applicants from the OA level background try to apply to FC college now.
Yeah. So there's also the socio-economic dynamics of public sector, within public sector universities. So Canadian FC College are not wholly public sector in the way Lahore College or government college are. But even within Lahore College and government college, there is a difference. And then, and then we've got, all those other, you've got your Islamia College, your Upper College. This is only Lahore. They are not getting any O-level students. But then, so we need to see where are those O-level students going within Pakistan. And then those universities need to be instructed to amend processes for them. And the other ones need to be instructed to amend overall processes overall.
Saima, again, we have a lot of variation in this also. So we have an entire set of colleges which are run by the army. And the military, and the other forces, so Army and Navy, which all offer O and A levels to the students. And उनके placement data हमारे पास नहीं है. हमें your experience and my experience is more the LGS Learning Alliance type of schools,
absolutely.
So we don't have a lot of consideration to the fact that there are those students who have a different set of affordability from, say, a Beacon House student. And their admission choices are going to be very much different. I'm currently working with a school that comes under such such types of schools, and the concerns of the students are very different. They want to apply to public universities, and their concerns are कि अच्छा UET में admission कैसे होगा, NUST के तो ठीक है admissions हो गए, UET के कैसे होगा, वेटनरी कॉलेज में कैसे होगा,
Absolutely,
यूएचएस
absolutely.
के रिजल्ट्स कैसे आएंगे, एलाइड हेल्थ के जो इतने पब्लिक यूनिवर्सिटीज में प्रोग्राम्स है उसमें एडमिशंस कैसे होंगे, प्लेसेस लाइक पियास व्हिच इज अगेन अ गवर्नमेंट इंस्टीट्यूशन, वो उसका क्राइटेरिया कैसे होगा. So it really drastically and also how the intake into the forces is going to be. So जो कैडेट वाले कोर्सेज हैं उसमें कैसे होगा.
Absolutely. So I
So
think our
that-
government needs to focus more on these things rather than going
Yes.
after Cambridge or being worried about what Cambridge is doing. That's done. That's done and dusted. That's not going to change.
Yes.
We also have to consider that a large, not a large majority, but a large number of students now. We've already outsourced a lot of our high school education to Cambridge, but we have also outsourced a lot of our university education to the University of London now. So we are going
Yes.
to have a lot of students who are going for University of London programs. How are they going to be assessing? And they have these teaching centers which are doing excellent work, and they're really filling a niche that was needed in Pakistan. How are those students going to get in? Will there be more demand for University of London type programs now for at least the next 2-3 cohorts or not? So those are all dynamics that we need to see as well.
Yes, and I think over the last few years, at least, I have seen that not only the University of London programs have mushroomed, there have been other universities which have also started offering external programs in Pakistan. And while some campuses have had trouble launching some new programs, they're still continuing with the old ones.
Yeah.
So while this year has been strange, a lot of changes have been taking place over the last few years, which have just kind of accumulated and amounted, and pretty much this is a very unprecedented situation, historically also.
And also, I think we need to look at the future and see, where is assessment going to go in the future? Will we have more online assessment? Because we have, now I think in the last 6 months, everybody's comfort with being online and learning and teaching online has drastically changed. And there's been, it's now gotten more credibility as well than it did before. So are we actually looking at improving? Forget about the international boards, but is our local board, and are we looking at bringing them all under one umbrella? Maybe using our national testing service to provide more standardized testing rather than having Multan board separate and Punjab Lahore board separate and Gujranwala board separate. What are we doing to standardize all our local boards? What are we doing to use technology and the National Testing Service to bring everything under one umbrella and have more regulation within our own assessment criteria?
Yes. And Saima, as far as I know, HSC has been doing some work about standardizing assessments for intakes at the higher education level, of course. And अभी जब इन्होंने law program को revise किया है और उसको दोबारा 5-year program पे ले गए हैं, so they have centralized an admission test for the law admissions at least. So things are changing, but again, it comes down to the fact that we don't know so much.
Yeah, and also,
yes, and I would say that there are a couple of things that need to be considered, and one thing is that we are a data deficient country. We should not forget that. So having such a sophisticated data is our not having this data is our weakness. Secondly, as you said, Saima, that there should be some variation in the policy matters, that how universities should now look at the situation. I don't think so that is going to happen. Reason being because we do not have very strong policy frameworks, even for one type of institution. So having contextualized policy frameworks and a way forward for different institutions as per their governing bodies, that seems to be a very far-fetched reality to me. Thirdly, I would say that when you say assessment in an online scenario, we as a country, I personally feel we aren't really ready for that. We really need nationwide support from organizations like NTS and National Testing Service, the ones who have the funding, who have the resources to seep into the grassroots level, because we cannot really ignore the public sector. And the public sector is not just universities, it's the schools as well, the high schools
Of
as well.
course, of course.
I don't know, but it doesn't look like a very promising situation, the way things are developing. And as Aktas has said, that the times have been so much different, and such times have been unprecedented for. So we still don't know where the world is going. We still don't know how education systems are going to revamp in the light of these developments. So these are too many ifs and buts. So I think instead of focusing on such a broad perspective, what we need to do as a country, we need to define procedures for higher education first. I mean, the secondary school education, and then starting off with the college and further on to the university. Thinking about too much and trying to achieve too much is just going to confuse us once again.
Absolutely. No, that's why I mean, my contention is that we need to focus on, you, as you said, using the National Testing Service, their outreach, the technology they have, and improving our own intermediate exam. Because we have to remember that a lot of students are only taking the Cambridge exam because they have lost faith in the intermediate exam. It is not as if the Cambridge exam doesn't teach them rote learning. It is not as if they can all, they're all gaining a lot from Cambridge exam. So if the government actually focuses on improving the standards of the intermediate exam, and at least makes they don't have to change the syllabus, at least just make the marking of it more transparent, and there should be more accountability and less cheating. Paper marking should be better. They should just start paying the examiners more, so that they're actually reading what they're marking, and people have more faith in the system. Then I think we will see a lot of people who are going into these small schools paying more than what they can afford to pay, just because they feel that it will be a fairer way of marking. I know that Beacon House, I think, recently did start, a few years ago, they did start a chain of schools and colleges that were offering the intermediate. Because we have a lot of students who swap from O levels into intermediate because they want to go into local universities. They don't want to lose out in the equivalences. So why not improve the way the intermediate is marked? And I think I was talking to Aktas before as well. We do know that teachers teach to the test. So if the way the paper is set is better, if people know that it's not just what is in the leaked guest paper that is going to be in the exam, then teachers will teach better in universities as well. And also, if I may go so far as to suggest that your elite schools should be given perhaps tax incentives for offering intermediate classes within their schools, so that students don't have to pay students who are not aiming to go abroad do not have to be forced to pay the Cambridge fee, and they can still study in these good schools, still, take advantage of all the extracurricular activities, all the grooming, but then just take the local exam and go to the local universities that they're actually targeting. I don't know why we cannot have that.
Yes, I think Saima, that gives us a lot of conversation for future Teach Talks, at least. We have covered a lot of very interesting aspects of the assessments today, about the history of how Cambridge has been developing results, has been providing results, how the schools have been impacted, how the students have been impacted, and kind of gone into what are the different challenges through which we can modify and approach higher education, intermediate level education, middle school education as we go along, and to really benefit the learner and prepare them for higher education in a way that works well for them. Okay. So, Mevish, if I could just ask you one last question. I really think this is a yes-no question, but I think this might really have a punchline in it. Okay, so do you really think that the results that we have received this year from the Cambridge assessments and international examinations can be considered authentic and valid?
Not at all.
Okay.
No.
Okay, I think that just leaves us with a lot more to discuss, and really question how Cambridge can perhaps think about the assessments that will take place in October and November. And Saima, if you have any concluding remarks to add at this point.
Yeah, I think Cambridge has already sort of set out their policy for October, November, but again, that is if the exams take place.
Yes.
So that's again something that, but they have clearly said that they will not be canceling exams. So so they may now have enough time to actually put forward an alternate method of assessment if in-person physical exams are not allowed. But I think for my final thoughts are for everybody to calm down a bit and to look at the situation not on the macro level, but on the micro level for each institution, and for institutions themselves to be more dynamic in the way they respond to the situation. Cambridge, unfortunately, has thrown its mess to the schools and the universities. The schools have now handled it however best they could.
The fee discount, Vinidia.
So now, rather than again, looking at what they have done, because that is out of our locus of control, what we can do is look at what we can do in terms of as universities, as institutions, as the government of Pakistan, as the Higher Education Commission. How do we support these students now and over the next 3 years till their O-level results convert into, till the O-level students have actually graduated with their A-level exams. So I think if every institution starts responding on its own level, then that way each, we can fix those blocks better rather than rather than expecting a worldwide approach that will fit our situation.
Okay.
Because whatever decision Cambridge takes will be internationally and not just for Pakistan.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Mehwish and Saima. It was a lovely conversation with you both. I really like the fact that you both could talk to each other.
Great to meet
and there was a lot of back and forth between the two of you without any prompting required. So thank you so much. It was lovely. I think it has clarified a lot of things that we can do and what schools need to be thinking about. If our audience has any topic that they want to us to talk about in future conversations, please leave us an email at info@teach.com.pk or leave a comment below this video. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, Akhtar. Thank you, Dr. Mehwish. Pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Same here. Thank you, Akhtar.
Bye.